You know that moment when you realize your jeans from 3 years ago don't quite fit anymore? Not because anything dramatic happened. You didn't change overnight. It just kind of happened gradually. And one day you tried to button them, and the universe sent you a clear message. That's what happens to operations inside growing companies. Nothing breaks dramatically. You just keep adding people, products, customers, and complexity. And one day, something that used to work just doesn't. And you're standing there wondering when that happened. Today, we're giving you 3 questions to ask yourself on a regular basis so you can stay ahead of that moment instead of being in cleanup mode. Hi, I'm Penny Cook. I'm a fractional COO and strategic operations consultant, helping product and consumer brands install, upgrade, and run scalable operations and operational systems that reflect the founder's unique vision and ambition.
Hi, I'm Sarah Wilson. I'm a fractional COO and operational turnaround partner for founder led SMBs. I help founders struggling with complexity at the core of their organizations. I work with founders to install scalable, repeatable processes that unlock the ability to grow with the tools and teams they already have. Let's get into it. So, the first point, and Penny, I'm such a fan of this, I would call it a practice of reflection that we should be doing as leaders of companies and leaders of operations. And the first question we really should ask ourselves is, are our systems keeping up? Now, I don't mean just, software. Sometimes when we say systems, we think the first thing we think of is the things that live on our desktops. But what I'm talking about when I say systems are the structure, the people, and the processes keeping up with the business. As your business scales, it's going to grow in complexity and grow in volume and busyness in all ways. And are your systems keeping up with that? So, how do we? That's a really big question to ask, I think. And there's some really easy ways to dig in a bit and identify some very specific questions you ask of yourself and you ask of your teams to really get to the heart of answering that bigger question of, are our systems keeping up? One
Yeah,
of them,
it's a great question. How do you know when you ask yourself, are your systems keeping up? What are the keys to know if they are or aren't?
yes, exactly. One of them is, where is my team spending times on workarounds? And workarounds can be one of those things that we've just always done it that way and we get in the habit. So
It's
the
so
the,
true.
the
Sometimes the
workaround,
teams don't even think they're using a workaround, but you as a leader see that things are not going through normal channels. They're
exactly.
working, but not within your system, right?
And one of the things to think about with that is, if you're using, say, your main system, your ERP, if you have one for the majority of tasks, yet there's this one thing that it's not, we're not using the ERP, we have a shadow system or a shadow process, as they call it. Those are really great ones to places to look first. And then another great question to ask ourselves is, if we had to rebuild that process from the ground up today, what would it look like? That's another really great question to ask. The other one that I'm a big fan of is really focusing on bottlenecks. They're usually a sign that something was maybe designed during a simpler time, before we got as busy, before the volume was what it was today. And bottlenecks can come in a lot of different ways. That could be as simple as an approval bottleneck or a decision bottleneck, or, why a budget approval process. It
Yeah.
could be a lot of
Those,
things.
those are such great examples of something that can build up over time, like approvals. Let's say you need approvals on POs, but the one person who approves them, they used to be able to easily approve a couple a week, maybe 10 a week, and all of a sudden now they're getting 10 a day or more, and it takes them days to get those approvals out when you need to get those orders into vendors or you're going to be late. Those are the kinds of bottlenecks where you know that your volume is outgrowing the system you have in place to move forward, right?
Exactly. And the final thing that I really love to use in my practice of reflection when I'm doing this in the businesses I work with is, what creates the most friction for the team.
Mm.
So, people may or may not, bring their complaints easily to the surface. It depends on the where you sit in the org. It depends on what's the culture of the teams. Things might show up as very clear complaints, or they might be just right underneath the surface. But the point I make here is that those complaints, however they come, is a really important data point and places to look for friction.
And there are definitely clues as a leader where you can find those friction points in both talking to your managers when you do one-on-ones. If you are in a place where you can actually walk around and see people doing their work, or when you're getting feedback about processes and adherence to processes, where are those little cues that things are not going as smoothly as people would like? Those are the friction points I think you're talking about, Sarah, where it's really showing that your operation is starting to fall behind, lag behind the growth that the rest of the company is experiencing, and a clue that you need to do something, right?
Exactly. And that bridges really nicely, because when we do that reflective work to find out where those friction points and those gaps are, as they say, gaps will appear, especially where we haven't even yet built a system to handle them. So that really brings us into the next key, which is really about, are we capturing what we should be? Penny, let's
Right.
talk about that more.
Right. Yeah. Once you're looking at those systems and you really are evaluating those on an ongoing basis, the next thing you really should be looking at is, where are we capturing everything we need to? Growth creates a lot of noise in the system. You as a leader really need to understand the things that you need to be leveraging for that information. So opportunities, follow-ups, feedback, relationships, they all need attention, and they all have valuable information to keep your organization in line with the level of the maturity of growth that you're currently in. Not because anyone dropped the ball, but because the system needs to be built around the pace of work that we're really experiencing as a reality. So, places to look are, opportunity tracking. Do you have a reliable way to know what's in the pipeline, what needs attention, and what you've let go quiet in there? There are things that there could be some very important things that aren't being noisy, that are quietly failing in the background. If it lives in someone's head, it's not a system. If it's not being tracked and measured and have goals, it's not a system. So track opportunities, look at your customer signals. Things like complaints, compliments, churn, buying patterns. These are all signals that your operation is getting that you can key off of. And unique for operations, you need to be watching these to understand, do you still have product market fit for what you're offering? And over time, as you start experiencing volume, or you start having more complex products that you're putting out there, or a greater product suite, you could lose product market fit, and you don't want that to erode over time. You need to stay within bounds. So it could be a sign that you're out of alignment with your sales or marketing team, where marketing is out there saying one thing, but you have a different approach in operations, and you need to be in alignment. Or it could be a sign that quality is falling off as you're approaching volume. And I've seen this before, Sarah, where we'll take services, for example. You have a few people offering a service that you're selling, and that's going really well, and all of a sudden your business triples overnight, and you don't have the people to offer that same quality. So people are either, they don't have the same level experience, if you're bringing them in, you don't have time to train them. Your quality of the service you're providing could fall off a cliff. Same thing with producing something in manufacturing. If you're producing 100 widgets a week, and then all of a sudden you're going to be producing 1,000 widgets a week, you have to be really careful to make sure that those 1,000 widgets are identical to those 100 widgets that are holding up the promise that you have for your customers. And sometimes those customers, those subtle customer clues that you get, churn, complaints, or even, hey, this is great, they're going to tell you, am I on the right track, or do I need to course correct somewhere?
I'm a big fan of all those measures you just talked about. Really, are customer centric. In operations, we can kind of forget sometimes that because we're in the business of the behind the scenes and the mechanics of making things work.
That's right.
And operations, just like every other department, is there to make sure that the customer, to your point, gets what they were promised. So I really, really like how you framed that, and I really like those metrics are so important.
They are. So Sarah, let's say we're now asking ourselves regular questions about our systems to keep up. We're looking at what kind of information is moving through our business that we can capture to help us. Now what do we do?
Now, what do we do? Penny, this one is one of my absolute favorites. Are we improving as we go? So, continuous improvement is a passion of mine. Not surprising since I'm in operations, but I'm actually a designated Lean Agile, Six Sigma. I have my green belt, and I remember when I went to get my green belt, it's like I finally found my people. Like, oh, this is an actual like a certificate I can get. This is a practice people do for real, and
Right.
it speaks to that continuous improvement doesn't have to be a formal program. You don't need somebody with, a green belt or, whatever color belt.
That's right.
It
It's good,
really,
by the way, it's great to have green belts in your organization because they
Mhm.
ask questions and look at things differently than some of your other people will. And I totally recommend, Sarah and what she's talking about here. But really, like what we're talking about is continuous improvement isn't just an initiative that you launch and then it's done. It is a mindset from your leaders and from your organization, right?
Absolutely. And it starts with that discipline of what do we learn from that? We often get caught up in the blame, even if we're as a culture really trying to be supportive, we can still sometimes fall into those bad habits of blame when we're looking at issues, when really the right question to be asking ourselves is what did we learn? The other thing that I've worked really hard in my own leadership practice to do right is that postmortem retrospective. As a PM, I like to call it lessons learned, and really framing those lessons learned for the most important thing is what we're going to learn from it, of course. The second, almost equally important thing on that one is to ensure that those are a safe space so that people feel comfortable and not called out when make it about the process, make it about the business. It is never about what you or what someone else should have done individually or personally. It's never about that.
Right.
And it can be a
It's
difficult
about the
balance to,
process.
yeah.
That's right. It's not a people problem. You know as a manager when it's a people problem, but this is really different than building a system that's going to grow and accommodate, that's going to be a living organism in your business, right? So I think that those retrospectives are so important, and I don't think that you should only have retrospectives when you finish a project or you finish a launch. In operations teams, there are things that we operationalize, and we are measuring our performance as we perform these duties for the company on an ongoing basis. You can have a quarterly retrospective on the operations to make sure you're gathering the signals, you're staying on track, and you're getting the feedback from the people who are actually executing the work, such that, like, again, you're finding the friction points, you're capturing the data, and then you're doing the analytic work with your team to make sure that you are working with them on adjustments where need be. And a quick example of this that I've seen is, for example, in manufacturing, where we're having a product line actually go crazy, and we were doing a new launch within that product line, and we were using old methods of how we launched products, but we had never done one this large. And it turned out like everything needed more time, we needed more materials, we needed more space, and because nobody had foreseen that we were going to have to do something differently, that we needed more because we were doing this larger launch, we caused overtime, there was last minute work, there was a bit of a scramble. Everything got done, but it was caught in the retrospective. Hey, you guys, this is what we need to be successful, from the people on the manufacturing floor. That information really got back in that retrospective, and we were able to then do an evaluation each time before we did a launch of how much advanced notice they needed, advanced training, things like shelf space, like really silly things that could slow down a launch. Catch those things, understand what they are, and make sure that your business is always as big as the work flowing through it.
Yes, that's a great example. Thank you so much. It drives home that it's often the littlest things that catch us up. It's sometimes it's the big things, but more often than not, it's that little thing that we would call silly that trips us up. So when we think about retrospectives, one of the last and final things I want to remind our listeners is don't forget the customer in that retrospective. So wherever possible, when we're doing that reflective practice, we want to include our customers in that feedback loop wherever possible, because that is in the end who we're here for.
Yep, that's so true. And so really being able to operationalize where you have pain points by understanding your systems, collecting information, and then putting in a mindset of continually improving by doing things like retrospectives that allow you to objectively analyze your own processes, ask those questions, and teach the people inside the organization to ask those questions continually too. Because again, as you're looking at data, as you have information to leverage, you're going to be able to get better, and you're going to be able to size up whether you have the right kinds of processes for the right stage of growth that you are in business. So pulling that all together, 3 questions every ops leader should be asking on a regular basis as a discipline. Are your systems keeping up with the company you are today? Are you capturing the information, opportunities, and signals that are moving through your business? And are you actually getting better as you go, or are you just getting bigger? That's the ops audit. Not a project. It's not a big initiative. It's a habit and a mindset inside your organization. And the ops leaders who internalize it to their organizations are the ones whose operations become an advantage. And if today's episode gave you something useful, we'd love it if you subscribe wherever you listen. It's the best way to make sure that you don't miss what's coming next. And if you know another ops leader who could use this conversation, please share it with them. And the show grows when you help us find the people that it's built for. If you're working through improving your own operations or any of these questions we talked about today, reach out to us directly. This is the kind of work that Sarah and I do with teams on a regular basis. You can find us on our website at operating-on-purpose.com or on LinkedIn, and we would love to talk to you.
Because great businesses don't just happen, they operate on purpose.
Thanks,
Thanks
Sarah.
so much,
Thanks,
Penny.
everyone, for listening.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Talk to you next time.